Part 7. The Dark Truth Empire of Shadowstein, now having complete control over the planet Earth, decides to attempt to colonize the dwarf planet of Pluto, and thus, the attempted colonization is begun. Shadow Emperor Alpha, having successfully brought the sacred relic and the sacred artifacts under his control, begins to corrupt them, warping their divine essence to his will. As he works, a sense of power and invincibility washes over him, and he revels in the knowledge that he has outsmarted the God Emperors and claimed their greatest creation for himself. Anyways, the Empire of Shadowstein, now having complete control over the planet Earth, attempts to colonize the dwarf planet of Pluto, led by their Shadow Emperor Alpha. As Shadow Emperor Alpha and his forces begin the process of colonizing Pluto, he feels a strange sensation washing over him. It's as if the darkness that has become his essence is reaching out to the distant dwarf planet, seeking to make it a part of his growing empire. He can sense the resistance from the celestial bodies that have been manipulated by the God Emperors in the past, but he knows that he is stronger, more cunning, and more ruthless than they could ever hope to be. The Shadow Emperor looks down upon the desolate surface of Pluto, imagining the thriving Shadowstein colony that will soon rise from its frigid depths. He can feel the potential of the planet, the way it yearns to be corrupted and twisted into something darker, more sinister. As his tendrils of shadow reach out and begin to wrap themselves around the world, he feels a new sense of purpose, a hunger that can only be sated by conquest and domination. The forces of Shadowstein spread out across the surface of Pluto, their boots crunching against the icy ground as they set up bases and begin the process of terraforming. The air crackles with the energy of their sorcery, the land itself trembling at the power that is being unleashed upon it. The Shadow Emperor watches from his command center, a smile curling the corners of his lips as he sees his vision taking shape before him. He feels a strange sensation, as if something is drawing him deeper into the heart of Pluto. Curious, he orders his most trusted advisor, Lord Lothar, to open a portal to the mysterious underworld of the dwarf planet. As the portal opens with a swirl of dark energy, Shadowstein troops rush forward, eager to explore the unknown realm that lies hidden beneath the icy surface. The soldiers descend into the darkness, their weapons and sorcery guiding them through the labyrinthine tunnels. The air grows colder and the ground harder as they delve deeper. Finally, they emerge into a vast cavern, its walls glittering with a strange, otherworldly light. In the center of the cavern, a towering obsidian spire thrusts upwards, its peak lost in the darkness above.
Shadow Emperor Alpha steps forward, his heart racing with anticipation. As he approaches the spire, he feels a strange tugging at his soul, as if some ancient power is calling out to him. With a single, determined motion, he raises his hand and touches the smooth, black surface of the spire. Electricity crackles through his body, and the air fills with a cacophony of otherworldly whispers. The obsidian spire pulses with light, revealing itself to be a massive conduit for an unimaginable power. The Shadow Emperor knows that this is it, the source of the strange sensation that has been guiding him across the solar system. This power transforms him into his true form, the Dark Emperor, or well, now, Dark Emperor Alpha, and it transforms his advisors as well, transforming Shadow Lord Lothar into Dark Lord Lothar, the Dark Lord who was once the last champion, and transforms Shadow King Mordecai and Shadow Queen Lilith into being the strongest they literally have ever been, into Dark King Mordecai and Dark Queen Lilith. What has happened to us? Shadow Lord Lothar asks, his voice barely recognizable as his own. I have become stronger, transformed. I am no longer Shadow Lord Lothar, Dark Lord Lothar answers, looking around at the others. And neither are you. You are all changed. Dark Emperor Alpha, realizing that he is back in his true form, decides to flee his empire for now, not wanting his advisors, his friends, to see the true darkness within him, as he now, endlessly more powerful, knows they suspected all along. He whispers to them, "You are now free. Free to rule the empire as you are meant to. Free from the shackles of my will. Go and be the leaders you were always meant to be. Make me proud." Dark Emperor Alpha then, himself, flies away, no longer needing a ship. He is no longer truly human anyway, hasn't been for 405 years. He flies away to the Shadow Planet, where he once ruled from, as the Shadow God long ago, when he let his rage and desire for revenge take over. Times he now looks back upon and feels ashamed. He flies past the darkened surface of Pluto, and the lightless surface of Earth, and the glittering, jeweled surface of Saturn, and the serene surface of Uranus, and the frozen surface of Neptune, and the swirling, storm-tossed surface of Jupiter, and the vast nothingness of the emptiness between the stars. The Shadow Planet looms before him, a dark and foreboding world. Shrouded in perpetual shadow, its surface a network of canyons, mountains, and obsidian towers. He can feel the power emanating from it, the ancient energies that once flowed through him, and his empire. He lands on the barren surface, his feet sinking into the soft, black soil, and takes a deep breath of the cold, dry air. He then looks down at his hands, now nothing but tendrils of darkness, as he now permanently lets his tendrils of darkness be outside of his power armor, itself now corrupted by the darkness of his mere presence, his entire body made of those same dark tendrils, which branch out from his body like a grand ancient tree of pure darkness. He takes another deep breath of the cold air, and feels it fill his non-existent lungs, and flows through his non-existent veins. He slowly walks forward, his feet leaving no impression on the soft, black soil, the obsidian towers reaching hundreds of feet into the air above him, their tips lost to the eternal darkness. He comes to a towering obsidian spire, twice as tall as himself, and feels drawn to it as if it were beckoning him, calling him back to the power he once knew, the power he once wielded, the power he once was. His tendrils of darkness writhe and slither up the obsidian surface of the spire, seeking purchase, seeking to reconnect with the ancient energies that once flowed through it and him. As he reaches the top of the obsidian spire, he looks out over his darkened empire, feeling the ancient energies surge through him once more, making him whole, making him powerful, making him alive for the first time in millennia. He feels truly alive, truly in control, truly himself. He knows that he must now find a way to use this power, this connection to the ancient energies, this newfound sense of self, to forge a new path for himself and his empire, one of peace and understanding, of cooperation and mutual respect. The Dark Emperor turns away from the obsidian spire and begins to walk back down the mountain, his tendrils of darkness flowing gracefully behind him, the ancient energies of the Shadow Planet pulsing through him, guiding him, leading him to a new destiny. And yet, as much as he tells himself that he feels free and alive, he in truth couldn't feel, more trapped and imprisoned and even dead inside, thinking of what his advisors, his former friends, must think of him. The Dark Emperor, a being of destruction, darkness, and conquest. He can no longer see them, or feel them, or sense them in any way, and that, he realizes with a sudden, sharp pang in his non-existent heart, is perhaps the cruelest punishment of all. For though he is free from their control, he is now utterly and completely alone, and he wonders if perhaps he would have been better off staying with them, if perhaps he could have found some way to redeem himself, to make amends for the countless atrocities he had committed, to somehow, in some small way, balance the scales of justice. As he walks, the ancient obsidian towers and darkened obsidian spires loom ever larger, their shadows stretching out like tendrils of darkness, reaching for him, pulling him back in. He can feel them calling to him, beckoning him back to the power he once wielded, the power he once was. And yet, despite the siren song of darkness, he finds himself resisting, fighting against the urge to surrender to the call of the obsidian spires. For he knows that to do so would be to condemn himself to an eternity of darkness and destruction, a cycle of suffering and despair from which there could be no escape. He must find another way, a path not of conquest and domination, but of understanding and cooperation, a path that leads him and his empire out of the endless darkness of the Shadow Planet and into the light, However dim and uncertain it might seem at first, only then, he thinks to himself, only then might he have any hope of redeeming himself, of making amends for the countless lives he has taken, and of perhaps, one day, finding some small measure of peace. POV switches to that of Dark Queen Lilith, formerly Shadow Queen Lilith, back within the dwarf planet Pluto. As the Shadow Emperor's tendrils of darkness flow away from Pluto, Lilith feels a mixture of loss, betrayal, and hope. She watches his transformation with awe and dread, wondering if the Dark Emperor will truly be able to resist the temptation of power and control. Despite her doubts, she feels a newfound sense of purpose to help guide the Shadow Emperor back onto the path of redemption and peace. The Shadow Emperor's advisors return to their posts, discussing the events that have transpired and the challenges that lie ahead. Lilith listens intently, offering her insights and suggestions. They decide to spread the word of the Shadow Emperor's transformation, using it as a rallying cry for change within the Empire. They will work together to bring about a new era of understanding and cooperation, one where the darkness of the past is finally left behind. As the days turn into weeks, Lilith finds herself spending more time with the Dark Lord Lothar. They discuss their shared history and the role they can play in shaping the future of their people. Lilith begins to see the man behind the title, the one who once loved and fought for the same things she does. Despite their past differences, they find common ground and a deep respect for each other. One night, as they sit beneath the stars, gazing out at the vast expanse of the universe, Lilith confesses her fears and doubts about the Shadow Emperor's transformation. Dark Lord Lothar listens patiently, offering words of comfort and encouragement. He tells her that they must trust in the Shadow Emperor's journey, and that their own actions will determine the ultimate fate of their empire. Together, they vow to work tirelessly to bring about a new era of peace and understanding, one where the darkness of the past is not forgotten, but rather transformed into a source of strength and wisdom. As they embrace their tendrils of darkness entwining, they realize that they are not so different after all, and that perhaps, together, they can forge a path forward for their people that is both honorable and true. POV switches to that of Dark King Mordecai, formerly Shadow King Mordecai, who is back on Earth in fact, and, well, he hears of the truth of Shadow Emperor Alpha being the Dark Emperor. Dark King Mordecai, formerly Shadow King Mordecai, thinks far back to the year 1000, when he was once a former alchemist who had betrayed the twisted pagan empire of Frosthaven and joined the seemingly pure Christian empire of Sanctity, until they made him a necromancer and had him lead an undead army against Vatican City. Then he had been defeated and had his power stripped by Emperor Thoric I of Frosthaven, who then exiled him. And then, when he tried to return to the Empire of Sanctity, Emperor Marcus Aurelius had turned him away, and he turned to the shadows and became an otherworldly being, a malevolent entity, known as the Shadow King, and then he was made a puppet by the Dark Emperor in the year 2124, who it turns out, his own Shadow Emperor Alpha, Emperor of the Empire of Shadowstein, who he respected and even saw as a brother, or at least a brother in arms, is the Dark Emperor himself, now going under the name Dark Emperor Alpha. He wonders what his own journey through the darkness would have been like if he had not been given the chance to redeem himself, to find redemption in the most unlikely of places, in the heart of his sworn enemy. In Lilith, he had become, in a way, a better person because of her, and now he feels a strange kinship with her, and a sense of responsibility towards her. As they continue to explore the depths of the Shadow Planet, they find a hidden chamber filled with ancient texts and artifacts, some of them bearing the mark of the Celestium crystals, the same artifacts that had corrupted the minds and souls of so many before them. But now, they seem to be imbued with a new purpose, a new meaning, a new hope. It is as if the Shadow Planet itself is trying to guide them, to show them the way forward, to help them find their place in this new world they are creating together. I think Dark King Mordecai says, his voice barely above a whisper, that this shadow planet, this place of darkness and despair, is trying to tell us something. It is trying to show us that even in the darkest of times, there is hope, there is redemption, and that perhaps we are not as different as we once thought we were. Lilith listens intently, her eyes glowing with a mixture of wonder and fear. "What do you mean?" she asks, her voice trembling with anticipation. Dark King Mordecai takes a deep breath, steadying himself before continuing. "I think," he says, "that this shadow planet is trying to tell us that we are all capable of change, that even the darkest of souls can find their way back to the light, if they are given the chance." Lilith nods, her eyes still fixed on the ancient texts and artifacts. "I believe that you're right," she says softly. "We have both been given a second chance at life, at redemption, and it's up to us to decide what we do with it." They find a hidden door, finding a chamber that shows murals that speak of the true God of existence. He went by many names: Erebium, Celestium, and now Erebus. And they learn that he is not a good kind of god, but that, despite being a god based in light, couldn't be more twisted and evil. They also find a strange artifact that seems to react to Lilith, giving her a vision of a new world, one where light and darkness can coexist, where the balance is not forced, but natural. In this vision, she sees herself as a ruler, not of the Shadow Empire, but of a new kingdom, where all beings, both light and dark, can find peace and understanding. The chamber also holds ancient texts detailing the rise and fall of empires, the cycles of creation and destruction, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness. As they read, they begin to understand that their own journeys are part of a larger tapestry, and that their actions can have profound consequences not just for the Empire, but for the very fabric of existence itself. They then notice that, throughout all of the texts, the darkness is, despite doing some terrible things, in truth, the one in the right, only seeking to aid all. But the light, despite claiming to be good, is always twisted and, despite helping those they like, ruin all others, and find something that shatters their entire perception. The first main instance was of the god Emperor Marcus Aurelius representing the light, stomping on all those that got in his way, and forcefully subjugating the entire planet, the entire universe, existence even, facing off against the new power, the Shadow God, which they recognize as being, who they now know as previously their Emperor Shadow Emperor Alpha, and now known as Dark Emperor Alpha. And then, they see the second main instance of God Emperor Marcus Aurelius again, but now accompanied by God Emperor Aldrich, who led a warmongering empire focused on conquest, facing off against the Dark Emperor, who they know is the man who was their empire, but went into self-imposed exile. And they even are shocked to find themselves in the text, always trying to stop the light, both before being puppeted by the Dark Emperor and afterwards. Except for Lothar, who they find once fought for the light as the last champion. And it wasn't until he was defeating and resurrected that he truly apparently saw sense. Dark Queen Lilith now feels ashamed for being so suspicious of their now former emperor due to him secretly being the Dark Emperor, when the Dark Emperor was always a being that only sought to bring prosperity and a world without hardship, no matter the cost. Dark Queen Lilith herself now remembers back to the year 1003, when she was an envoy of the Kingdom of Scotland, which was then controlled by the god Emperor Marcus Aurelius, with a snap of his fingers, but she had refused to be controlled and, after time had been restarted, and she had filled her role as the envoy of the Kingdom of Scotland, she turned to the shadows and went to the Shadow Realm, and became the Shadow Queen, and later knows she made a deal with a Shadow King, who she now just realizes is Mordecai, and planned to betray him, and then, suddenly, she was a puppet to the Dark Emperor, who she now knows is her now former Emperor Dark Emperor Alpha. formerly Shadow Emperor Alpha, and even then, she planned to betray him until then the God Emperors defeated her with a snap of their fingers, and then, later on, she wore reincarnated as her current self. She remembers how she was supposed to be suspicious of the Dark Emperor, and how she was right to be, but now, she feels ashamed for not giving him the benefit of the doubt, because she now knows that the Dark Emperor's intentions were always to bring prosperity and a world without hardship, even if it came at a cost, and she knows that she, as the Dark Queen, could have done so much more for that cause if she hadn't been so blinded by her own hatred and desire for power. Now, as they stand there, looking at the artifact, she feels a newfound responsibility towards it, and towards the Shadow Planet, and towards Mordecai, who she now sees as a brother, and towards the entire Empire, even those who have wronged her. She wonders about her own journey through darkness, and how it would have been different if not for Lilith. And she can't help but feel that there is still hope for redemption, even for someone like her. And now Dark Lord Lothar begins to remember back to even before the year 1000, when he lived in San Marino, and with a young noble named Marcus Aurelius, he formed an empire called the Empire of Sanctity, and became its first emperor back when he was known as Marcus, and then, afterwards, he stepped down from the throne and let Marcus Aurelius become the emperor, and then he had changed his name to Lothar and became a warrior. Then, for thousands of years, he continued to be a warrior, eventually becoming known as the Last Champion, until in 2124, when he arrived to aid the Empire of Sunhaven against the Storm Dragon and the Shadow King, who he now realizes is Mordecai, and continued his assault until he was finally struck by a charged attack from the Storm Dragon. Then the Shadow King enveloped him with a wave of darkness, healing his wounds, empowering him, and resurrecting him, but letting him keep his free will. And he pledged loyalty to the man who saved him, and he expanded his empire, until him and his master were suddenly the puppets of the Dark Emperor, meant for a great purpose, which he only now realizes, and then the God Emperor snapped them all away, and he was gone until recently he was reincarnated into his present self. Dark Queen Lilith listens intently to Lothar's story, reflecting on her own past life as an envoy of the Kingdom of Scotland, ruled by God Emperor Marcus Aurelius. She refused to be controlled by him and turned to the shadows, eventually becoming the Shadow Queen and making a deal with Shadow King Mordecai. She was later controlled by the Dark Emperor, whom she now knows is her former Emperor Alpha. She remembers being suspicious of him and being right to be, but she feels ashamed for not giving him the benefit of the doubt, as she now knows his intentions were always for prosperity and a world without hardship, even if it came at a cost. She realizes that she could have done more for that cause if she hadn't been so blinded by her own hatred and desire for power. The three then decide that, under their new unified rule, to do what they think their emperor would have done, and maybe, when there are no more threats left, go to make amends with their own empire, who had gone into self-imposed exile so as to not infuriate them with his presence. The Shadow Queen nods solemnly, her eyes shining with determination. Yes, I believe that is the best course of action. Perhaps one day we can even find a way to reunite our empire with the one we once called home?